Debuts, there he goes, looking for debuts. I had trouble with this because there's a lot of times when the debut is not really what they end up doing in their career, their contribution. Or if their debut is juvenilia and they try to call it back, like Lou Reed's first solo album. So what I chose to do is to compare two records from 20 years apart from the same genre.
Well, I didn't have any trouble finding debuts. I am closer to a completist. As it happens, I've got a lot of debuts in my collection that I think are great.
First, how a band entered the scene, the record that put them on the map or didn't, but anyway, that was their initial offering.
My first record is Venom's Welcome to Hell. This is about as classic as you could want. It's from 1981. And it was, at the time, probably the single most extreme metal record that had ever been released. These guys were from Newcastle in, I don't know, is that the English Midlands or something? In any case, it's an industrial, sort of a bleak industrial city in England. And the so-called new wave of British heavy metal was really in flight at that point. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, stuff like that. These guys took some of that, and they took some of punk rock. They took punk's like, three chords and the truth sort of approach. Punk's determinedly amateurish approach, and they ran with it. It is sloppy as shit. It was recorded entirely. It was recorded in 3 days, I believe, and it kind of sounds like it. It sounds rushed. It sounds extremely aggressive. The drums sound like cardboard boxes, and the drummer definitely can't keep time, but it doesn't really matter. These songs are awesome. These are like revved up new wave of British heavy metal songs. This is just, it's faster. It's sort of like proto thrash, proto speed metal, maybe. Yeah, this is a more hostile and frightening record than anybody had made at this point. And when I first heard this when I was 12 years old, I found it to be hostile and rather frightening, and therefore totally intoxicating. And it still sounds great. Oh, another thing that's sort of notable about this record is that this was like the most overtly satanic metal album. It more or less set the template for who knows how many thousands of bands using goats and pentagrams in their logos, and writing songs like Sons of Satan and Welcome to Hell and Witching Hour, 1,000 Days in Sodom, In League with Satan, etc., etc. Totally low budget, extremely hostile, charmingly amateurish, totally classic, and hugely, hugely influential. You can't overstate how influential this album is. And the second one is from 2012. It's Goat's World Music. Goat, sort of a collective from Sweden. They have an origin story that is almost certainly bullshit, but it's a great story. So the story goes, they come from a commune in far northern Sweden, which for hundreds of years has practiced some sort of voodoo rites because a traveling witch doctor set up shop there, and but then Christianity came along. But in any case, this is sort of a collective musical effort. They create music. This was the first record. They put out 6 or maybe 7 at this point. But this is a combination of sort of Fela Kuti style Afrobeat, Black Sabbath or Blue Cheer kind of fuzz guitars. There's a lot of Maggot Brain style funkadelic in there. Definitely a lot of psychedelia in there. There's some prog, and they mix it all together. And it's a hell of a brew, really. There isn't a bad song on this record. The guitars are just, like Jimi Hendrix style, like acid wah guitar solos. It's pretty great. Really good stuff overall. And I can't recommend this band or this record in particular highly enough. So, who's next?
I picked the Flying Burrito Brothers, The Gilded Palace of Sin from 1969 on A&M Records. And as you can see, they're having fun in Joshua Tree here with their nudie suits, which is sort of the tradition of country music. Is George Jones would get a nudie suit with, Western iconography. Well, they've replaced that with some overt religious iconography, wizardry, and marijuana leaves as well. Yeah. So they got it all going on. This is an early example of country rock from the 60s, but it's fused with R&B. In fact, they do a couple covers by Spooner Oldham and Dan Penn. The Dark End of the Street and Do Right Woman is a Dan Penn title as well. This is chock full of classics. And although it's not the first country rock record, I mean, Dylan had made two records in Nashville, and Graham Parsons, who's leading this group, had the project, the International Submarine Band, a year before he joined the Byrds. But what makes this over the top is that they have two secret weapons. They have the voice of Graham Parson, which is just based on tradition, experience as a singer, and this sort of nuanced, fragile, cosmic element. But overall, he is completely resigned in his vocal delivery. It just feels tragic, like all good country music, lots of pathos. So, and it's got Sneaky Pete Keenlow, who is right there playing the lap steel in place of lead guitar. So it's just this crazy lap steel, very distorted. And it really makes it, he's good on every project that he's a part of. So this is good tragic country. And based on the content, which was written by Chris Hillman from the Byrds and Graham Parsons, they're fresh off the Sweethearts of the Rodeo album that the Byrds made. And they banded together and rented a house in Laurel Canyon, sitting by the pool. They wrote these classic California, based on California mythology songs. They are mega classics, these songs. A lot of people have covered them, including Elvis Costello, who did a cover of Hot Burrito #1, which is thought to be, well, Graham's version is thought to be one of the best vocal performances of the times. And so, with lyrics like this old earthquake's gonna leave me in the poorhouse. It feels like this whole town's insane. On the 31st floor, a gold-plated door won't keep out the Lord's burning rain. It's good for any collection of cosmic American music, which is what Graham called his music anyway. 20 years after that, there's a band out of Minnesota, the Jayhawks, who recorded this Blue Earth in 1989 for Twin Tone. This is actually not their debut record. They had a record that was recorded 4 years before called the Jayhawks, which was Juvenilia. I mean, they really hadn't found their sound. So no one really counts it, and I certainly don't. But this also has classic cuts. When it came out, Robert Christgau wrote in the Village Voice, he gave it an A- and said, this is the album that the Burritos never made because their follow-up was so horrible. But I don't think it sounds like the Burritos because it's got a different kind of mythology that's woven through these tunes. of like open landscape, interrelationships. It's not your ordinary country fodder. So it's also got Mark Olson, who wrote all of side one and most of side two and sings most of those songs. And he's got a special voice. It's really sweet and humble, and but with authority. And also Gary Loris, who was the guitar player who's supplying lots of snappy, incendiary guitar. So this is a smooth and confident band. They have great harmonies. And they did three albums together with Mark Olson singing. And then Gary took over the band, made another seven records, which I have none of because I really am a fan of the voice here on this album. Now, Mark went on to move to Joshua Tree, of all places, and create the Honey Creek Dippers with his wife, Victoria Williams. So this is great for anybody collecting alt country, roots music, anyway, and it's got those country pathos that we're looking for.
Yeah.
All right, so I chose for item number one the debut album by the Stranglers, which inexplicably has a four on the cover in Roman numerals. That its actual title is Rattus Norvegicus or Norvegicus. I suppose in ancient Rome they would have had a hard G. Anyhow, this came out in 1977, and it already sounds like a mature effort. They went on to crank out any number of albums in quick succession, and each one better than the last for the next 3 or 4 years. No More Heroes, Black and White, The Raven are all excellent. These guys released this album when punk rock was young and angry, and they weren't so young or angry so much as grizzled and ominously embittered, which is or embittered. I mean, there's a kind of creepiness to this record that I think is great. The standout, the track that everybody knows, which is Peaches, which has this great sleazy bass line and this great sleazy lyrics and this great sleazy delivery about walking down the beaches, staring at the peaches. Anyhow, the Stranglers. So what the neat thing about the Stranglers for me is that these guys are all incredible musicians. They've got the best bass tone of anyone, and like they created the bass tone that basically everybody they got their bass sound from this. And I think Hugh Cornwell is a great guitarist who really he comes up with these lines that are counterpoint to everything else. He doesn't strum chords. He kind of, again, he noodles around. So it's a very mobile music. And then there's keys too. So between the keys moving around, the bass moving around, and the guitar moving around, you have this very it's gritty and sleazy sounding, but it's sort of scintillating too, because there's a lot of movement on the surface. Hanging around is about Christ up on the cross, just hanging around. So you've got all the blasphemy you would and irreligion and sort of contempt for piety that you would want from punk or heavy metal, but really in a musical idiom that is totally unique. So my second album is the debut by Devo, Akron, Ohio's finest. And strangely enough, a band beloved by Neil Young. But this is where it all started. It was incubating for about half a decade. They met at, I believe, Kent State University, where of the site of the famous shootings. And their music is kind of a response to the disillusionment that followed upon the killing of students, who were just peacefully protesting the war. Instead of going the hippie direction, though, they steered in this bizarre, something like 1950s Americana that had been sort of stripped of its varnish and luster. So any number of great originals, the famous Jocko Homo, which is the little snails bit, Mongoloid, Come Back Johnny, and then also an absolutely riveting cover of the Stones' Satisfaction. Devo version adds this whole new dimension of to the pathology of the original. So the original is just this kind of complaint about a lack of sexual activity. The Devo Satisfaction is a complete freak out about no home appliance working correctly or something. And in fact, everything in the home sort of turning on you and contriving your doom.
Oh, wow, baby, you're up.
Having that nervous reaction where you inhale like a small dog.
Fuzz guitar crunch, fuzz guitar crunch, fuzz
That
guitar.
we lost our tails, evolving up from little snails. I say it's all just wind and sails. Are we not men? We are Devo.